Kirk Douglas was fighting studio suits tooth and nail, and James Stewart gave the performance of his life while Hollywood looked the other way. These are the highest-rated 60s westerns they didn't want you to remember, and some of them are better than the classics we grew up on. Hombre is one of the most quietly brutal westerns of the 1960s, and somehow it still doesn't get the credit it deserves. Based on an Elmore Leonard novel directed by Martin Ritt, this one's got Paul Newman playing a man raised by Apaches who's now being looked down on by every other passenger in a stagecoach, until they need him to save their lives. It's a movie full of familiar Western types: the sleazy Indian agent, his refined but clueless wife, the talky outlaw, the kid who's always called the kid. You've seen versions of these characters 100 times, but just because the ingredients are familiar doesn't mean Hombre isn't an absorbing, suspenseful film. Paul Newman plays it cold, quiet and hard-edged, right in line with the loners he played in HUD and The Hustler. And there's real tension in how much he just doesn't care about these people until push comes to shove. Richard Boone makes for a fantastic villain, and Martin Balsam is right there too, playing the good Mexican as written with surprising depth. Even Roger Ebert said the performances were uniformly excellent and singled out those three in particular. Steve McQueen actually turned down the role because it reminded him too much of a half-native part he'd played earlier. After seeing the movie, he called it one of Newman's best performances, and even Sean Connery himself said Hombre was his favorite film. Now this one is a real sleeper. Sergeant Rutledge is a courtroom western from John Ford, and yeah, that's the same John Ford who'd spent decades pushing every stereotype in the book. But here he turns around and tells a story about a black cavalryman facing a court-martial for murder. This is Ford trying to atone a bit for the damage done in earlier films like Judge Priest. And of the two late career attempts at dealing with race, Cheyenne Autumn being the other, Sergeant Rutledge is by far the better film. It's tighter, darker, and doesn't tiptoe around the subject. Woody Strode plays the title role, and he owns the movie. His courtroom monologue is one of the most quietly powerful scenes Ford ever directed. Jeffrey Hunter plays the officer defending him. And yes, Hunter always felt underrated, but here, he really shows what he could do. This was the first Hollywood movie to center on a black Buffalo soldier, and Ford took it seriously. The pacing is lean, the tone is grim, and it's more direct than you'd expect from a guy known for his romanticized West. You want charisma? The Professionals has more of it in a single frame than most action films have in their entire runtime. Burt Lancaster, Lee Marvin, Robert Ryan, Woody Strode, Jack Palance, and Claudia Cardinale thrown in for good measure. It's a stacked cast, and it knows it. The plot's simple. A millionaire hires a crew of seasoned fighters to rescue his kidnapped wife from a Mexican bandit. Classic assemble the team setup. But it leans into it hard. These are men who are loyal, weathered, and completely committed to the mission until they realize maybe the mission isn't what it seems. Richard Brooks directed it, and Roger Ebert once said it was the best directed Hollywood film of the year. That's saying something. Brooks may have leaned into nostalgia, but he also brought grit and bite to the whole thing. The film is brutal when it needs to be. The cinematography, shot across desert heat, rain, sleet, even a flash flood, is gorgeous. The chemistry between Lancaster and Marvin is incredible. The writing is tight and the pacing never lets up. Ryan and Strode don't get as much screen time, but they make the most of it. And Palance, as always, knows exactly how to chew the scenery without going too far. It picked up 3 Oscar nominations and then sort of vanished from the conversation. But it's absolutely one of the last great classical westerns, right before the whole genre got torn up and rewritten in the 70s. Everyone knows The Wild Bunch, but this might be Sam Peckinpah's real masterpiece. It was only his second movie, made for just $813,000, and the cast is stacked: Joel McCrea, Randolph Scott, Warren Oates. And for both McCrea and Scott, this movie became a career bookend. Scott actually retired after seeing the finished film. He said he wanted to quit while he was ahead because he knew he'd never top what he did here. McCrea followed suit, not immediately, but eventually bowed out for good after Mustang Country in 1976. Whole thing plays like a quiet tragedy with 2 old cowboys who know the West is leaving them behind, and Peckinpah turns that into something funny, touching, and totally unsentimental. The story's simple. Two old-timers are hired to haul gold from a mining camp. One of them sees it as a job. The other's already planning the double cross. What starts as a basic Western turns into something way more personal. And yet MGM had no faith in it. They buried it on the bottom half of double bills, paired it with stuff like Boys' Night Out and The Tartars, a sex comedy and an Italian medieval drama. Total mismatch. But here's the kicker. Audiences were walking out after Ride the High Country, skipping the main feature. Once the studio caught on, they re-released it and finally gave it a proper shot. James Drury said it best. The whole movie was magical. It became a classic Western that has always remained in circulation. People think the world of it. Not exactly buried at the box office, this one actually pulled in $14.5 million, which today would be around $155 million, but it still doesn't get the credit it deserves. This is John Wayne in full comedy mode, playing George Washington McLintock, a powerful rancher juggling every kind of conflict you can imagine. Ranchers, government officials, native tribes, settlers, shopkeepers, and most importantly, his estranged wife Kate, played by Maureen O'Hara. O'Hara and Wayne had a whole string of hits together, Rio Grande, The Quiet Man, The Wings of Eagles, but McLintock is where they really leaned into the bickering. It's basically Taming of the Shrew in the Old West, and the whole thing plays like a big, rowdy stage play with dust and horses. Producer Michael Wayne and director Andrew McLaglen went all in on the slapstick, and the result is one of the most raucous movies Wayne ever did. It also came at a good time. Wayne was still recovering financially and critically from the Alamo, and McLintock helped win back some of that box office goodwill. The Sundowners is set in early 20th century Australia, not the American West, and it follows a nomadic family living out of a wagon. Robert Mitchum plays the dad, a stubborn man who refuses to settle down, while Deborah Kerr plays the mom who's just trying to build a stable life. The film looks gorgeous thanks to director Fred Zinnemann, who insisted on shooting everything on location in the Australian outback. Studio boss Jack Warner wanted to shoot in Arizona to save time and money, but Zinnemann wasn't having it. That decision came with a price. The weather was brutal. 12 weeks of shooting scenery and shepherding before the cast even arrived, and when they finally did, the weather flipped back and forth between blistering sun and freezing rain. It dragged production out by weeks. Robert Mitchum got so mobbed by fans he had to move onto a boat to escape them. Deborah Kerr, meanwhile, gave what might be the best performance of her entire career. She thought she deserved the Oscar for it, and honestly, she might have been right. She got her 6th Best Actress nomination for this film, and lost for the 6th time. No one else in Oscar history had been nominated that many times for Best Actress without winning. The film itself is solid. Not flashy, not adrenaline-pumping, but it works. It's slow in parts, sure, but if you're patient with it, there's a quiet charm to the whole thing. It's not an all-time great, but it is one of those lost gems that doesn't get talked about anymore, and it absolutely deserves a second look. Kirk Douglas did a lot of legendary films, Paths of Glory, Ace in the Hole, Spartacus, but out of everything, the one he personally loved the most was this one. Douglas plays Jack Burns, a lone cowboy who refuses to fit into the modern world. It's a quiet, character-driven neo-western that didn't try to be trendy or slick. It just told the story of a man out of time. It flopped at the box office, and Douglas always blamed Universal for the failure. He wanted to call the movie The Last Cowboy. Simple, powerful, but the studio ran the title through a computer and came back with Lonely Are the Brave, which Douglas hated. Even with the BAFTA nomination and a later nod from the American Film Institute, the film slipped into obscurity. These days, only die-hard fans and film nerds know about it. But Douglas stood by it till the end. He once said this movie was so much better than some foreign horseshit about an actor chewing for 20 minutes. And yes, maybe it was anti-establishment. Maybe it was just about a stubborn cowboy. But either way, it was his favorite for a reason. This one hits harder than you might expect. Shenandoah is a Civil War-era Western starring James Stewart as a Virginia farmer who wants no part in the war until his youngest son is taken by Union soldiers. That's when things change. The tone is somber, and the pacing is slow, but the story has weight. Stewart plays a father with 5 sons and several daughters, all trying to stay neutral in a war they don't believe in. They're against slavery. They don't want to fight for either side. But eventually, war comes to them. It's directed by Andrew McLaglen, a guy mostly known for TV, and yes, it does have that old-school feel. But the family dynamic is strong, the cast chemistry is spot on, and Stewart grounds it all with that quiet intensity he had in his later years. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done. The film builds to a realistic, quietly devastating ending. No Hollywood gloss, just a well-made, thoughtful war western that doesn't get nearly enough credit today. Firecreek stars James Stewart as a part-time sheriff in a nothing little town, and Henry Fonda as the leader of a gang of outlaws who ride in and start tearing things up. Fonda's crew is packed with familiar faces: Jack Elam, James Best, Morgan Woodward, Gary Lockwood. He tells them to behave, but it doesn't stick. They cause trouble. Stewart, whose job up until now has been dealing with drunks on Saturday nights, is suddenly staring down real violence, and with a pregnant wife at home. The film didn't get much love at the time. Critics called it slow, people wrote it off, but it's held up surprisingly well. Fonda is excellent when he's playing evil, and this was before his villain turn in Once Upon a Time in the West. Lockwood, by the way, is terrifying in this, just completely unhinged. The final shootout is clearly influenced by High Noon, but that's not a bad thing. It's still gritty, tense, and well executed. Firecreek never had much flash to it. It's not stylish, it's not loud, but it works. If you're into darker, character-driven westerns where the hero doesn't want to be one, this one's worth digging up.